the mind behind master-slave lifestyle. What makes a good master or a bad master? And what is the difference between a noble or a vile slave? And do you know the difference? Discover your warrior, magician, lover, and king. Journey into the light and shadow of master-slave relationships and how this can allow you to go deeper than you ever thought you could. A new series of episodes released every month between the interviews. What's your shadow? What's your pull to the dark side?
One of the most important things a master needs to do in order to become great is to work on master as a king. But so many masters do not, and they end up in the horrific darkness of master as a tyrant. And those that do not end up becoming a weakling. Find out how leadership is such an important part of this, but so is passion and purpose and so many other things. Join me as I discuss master as a king. The heart-centered master as king or leader can be broken down into a number of different areas. We're going to go through them one by one. A master lives for his purpose. A master knows his purpose in life and works towards it. A master living for his purpose uses his masculine energy in the most constructive way possible to build and create his purpose and vision. A purpose is a reason why we exist. For example, one of my central purposes is to serve, help and support people, especially around the master-slave lifestyle. A master's purpose might be to have a BDSM household that they're the head of, or it could be something that they want to achieve in the world, or a change they want to make in the world. It takes time to find your purpose, so if you don't have one yet, don't worry. But when you don't know your purpose, you should take the steps to determine what it is. We live in a materialistic society, so we often confuse a true purpose with collecting material goods, or a shitty business vision around making money. A genuine purpose is about what you did, your difference in the world, and how you make your life worthwhile. Think of a purpose as to how people will remember you, your legacy. What would you like to be remembered for when you die? Or what will you remember as having made your life worthwhile on your deathbed? For myself, the master-slave lifestyle is part of my legacy, not the website or podcast itself, but the change it helps to bring in others, that it helps people to truly live the life that they were meant to. To live my purpose, I work as a coach, helping masters and slaves. I also work as a career coach for those wanting to change their career to one that is more closely aligned with their purpose. And I also work as a leadership coach. But actually, if I go a bit deeper, for each of these, I help people to understand who they truly are and to live their lives with authenticity and integrity, and how they in turn can help others. I then see them in turn also help others. So my legacy is to bring about a wider change in the world, each person helping the next to live their lives authentically. All of us part of a vast ripple, bringing about positive change. Each year I will ask myself, if I was to die in a year's time, what would I regret not doing? This is no trivial question for me, as I've seen so many people die over the past few years, and most of them are under 60. And I use this question to help me stay true to my purpose and ensure that I can express my life's purpose each day. A master as a king is also a good leader. In reality, many people who desire leadership desire power, with little interest in those they lead. As a business coach, I have been surprised by the number of people who do anything to try and gain power. Many struggle to gain it as they never have the respect of the people they lead. They are always insecure in their power, as they do not win their team's hearts and minds, and they always want more. Some have no values and integrity and will do anything to gain that power, from threats to manipulation. Unfortunately, I've seen too many of those people succeed. And this says a lot about the state of leadership in business and how little of the king we can find in many of our leaders. Others want leadership for the money or the materialism that can come from it. I have found that many of these people burn out at a certain point because their leadership holds so little joy, or they don't have a purpose. A good leader is often one that uses their servant leadership to use their power to empower and ensure the well-being of their team. A good master will find much to learn in the best practice examples of servant leadership in order to be a good leader themselves. A good master and a good leader and king must have integrity and authenticity. They do not put on a performance or have a fake facade. Instead, they are themselves. They role model the behavior they want to see in others, not by pretending, but because this is who they really are as a person. A good king knows the values they hold as a person, and a master will truly live by them. They do this despite the challenges that they might have in living those values. Being who you are is also very important when you're going into more long-term mastery or slavery. It's quite common for a lot of masters to burn out when they have a slave for a longer period of time. Sometimes this could be a weekend, sometimes it can be a bit longer. But one of the biggest causes of that burnout is because the master is putting on a show. They're literally pretending to be some sort of master rather than themselves. And of course, at a certain point, putting on that act or that show becomes too tiring. And then they have to stop. Instead, it's best to figure out how you can be a long-term master by being yourself. How you can still be a master in control, to still be sadistic, but also that you are your normal self at the same time. In the Master as Warrior podcast, I spoke about punishment and the need to lead with justice and wisdom. A good master knows the best way to punish is by using the justice and wisdom they have built up with their king aspect. This is how a master can hold good boundaries with a slave. Correct them when they cross a boundary, but they do this from their wisdom, and in doing so help the slave to grow and become the best they can be. A good master is also a guide and a supporter, helping their slaves and others to fulfill their potential and helping them find their way. Another aspect is to maintain the order and stability to nurture those he leads. For example, a master provides structure, order and stability to those he leads. He keeps his kingdom in check and working well. But importantly, the structure and stability provided are not just to serve his needs, but to also allow his slaves to flourish. A good master helps his slaves become the best they can be, not only in their service to the master, but also in other parts of their lives. The structure the master allows his slave to thrive. A true master helps the slave become the best and most authentic person they can be in all parts of their life. A good master can make good decisions. And note here I said good decisions. Too often, masters believe that a quick, unchanging decision is best. A quick decision is often made on assumptions and can often turn out not to be true. Often masters and leaders in general can refuse to change decisions based on new data or refuse to accept new facts. When this has occurred, the master has tied his ego and sense of identity to the decision. It means that if the decision needs to be changed, they did something wrong and have failed somehow. Good masters and leaders are good at making decisions. But as new information is available, they can change the decision without any emotional upset based on the facts. Think back to many Hollywood movies of the ship's submarine captain and his first officer. The archetypal good captain or skipper is the one that listens to the feedback and changes his decision when he realizes he is wrong. Crimson Tide is an excellent example of this, with the captain not listening to the first officer and try to sideline him, and with the stakes of the wrong decision being a nuclear war. Another good movie to watch is 13 Days. This is set in the White House during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it shows how Kennedy refused to make quick decisions and to not be boxed into a corner. The reason for this was that a quick decision would have led to World War III and a nuclear apocalypse. So a good master listens to his slaves, he listens to others, he takes in information to truly understand the situation and then decide. And if he realizes or receives information from someone, even a slave, that he's made the wrong decision, he will change and adapt it. If you're interested in learning more around these sorts of mindsets, I do have an article on the website around the master mindset. I shall include this in the show notes. A good master and king also holds the runes of the household on himself. So a good master can deal with issues and conflicts within his household. Too often I've seen master-slave relationships break down because of a real-world event. For example, a family death, or a family member's health, or something like redundancy. The relationship between the master and slave was often so brittle and unchanging that a regular life event brought about the end of the relationship. Now, this does not need to be the case. A good master can deal with these events and impacts. The structure he has created should be malleable and flexible enough to deal with these events while also allowing the slave to thrive under his control. When these regular life events occur, and illness and death are regular life events, the master must hold things together, looking after the slaves, adapting and ensuring his household or his kingdom will survive. A master must also heal and deal with his wounds while dealing with the slaves in his household. He does not act out, he does not take issues and stress out on others, and he can do so while being in charge. After all, the cost of being in control and in charge is that you must do this in good and bad times. A good master and a good king has learned how to do this. Many masters believe that asking for help, whether with his slaves or outside the family, or admitting they are struggling, is a sign of weakness. This is wrong. It is a sign of strength and allowing the master to hold his wounds while tending to his slaves. This also includes helping for help when needed. In one of the earlier episodes, I recommended reading a chapter in a book called Sacred Power, Holy Surrender. This is edited by Raven Caldera. This reflects the situation well. Check other resources at the end for more information. A good master also blesses others. So a master will bestow his blessing on people beneath him. In olden times, a king would hold court and reward good service and expertise, not because he particularly needed it, but because his people needed it. Recognizing, blessing, validating, and rewarding them was something they needed. And so with the kings of old, it also applies to the good masters of today. The master provides his blessing to the slave for good work and service, not only for the exemplary service to him, but also for the slave's accomplishment in the real world. The movie, The Green Knight, shows an amazing example of this blessing a leader can provide to another. Another aspect of master as a king is that a master must be resilient, not only because of the points above, but also because of how people see him. We can think of masters as leaders. Good leaders tend to shine differently from most other people. They stand out, and we often look up to them. This is true for both masters and slaves. But as you shine, you are more noticed. This can lead to people projecting onto you. People can project their hopes, dreams, and beliefs onto these people, seeing them more as divine than a person. And this can lead to expectations that no one can match up to. The same person is then subject to disappointment and bitterness when people find out that they are but human. In addition, other people can look at this shining with envy and jealousy. Sometimes they attempt to sabotage what the person has, including the household. Because of this, a master must be resilient. resilient against the projections and unrealistic expectations people might have towards them, and resilient against people who would try to attack and sabotage themselves and their household. Now, there is a lot of pressure in what I've described here, so how does one person do all of this? Well, a good king will ask for help from those he leads, as will a good master. And it's not only about helping other people, but to do this step by step. In some of the other books that I have read around this, people that really come into their king energy tend to be in their mid-50s. And this is people that have done a lot of their own inner work to come out of the shadow and into the light. Of course, there can be certain people that somehow do this younger, but for the most part, this is a lifetime of work that we're talking about, something we do step by step. So this shouldn't stop you from becoming a master from a younger point, but it is a sign that to become a good master and to continue to grow and to become king as a master, this is a lifetime of work. We've just gone through what are the positive aspects of master as a king. Let's now move to shadow master as a king. As a reminder that we have our golden side and we also have our shadow side, things that we might have repressed or things that have come out that make us act in less positive ways. A really good metaphor is to think of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. One person that had both the good and the shadow that came out in terrible and horrific ways. Now, for Shadow Master as a king, a person that generally embodies the king knows their worth. They have repaired many of their own psychological wounds and shadows so they can truly grow. But if we were always told to do better, give more, and achieve more in childhood, we can believe that goals and achievements are the only worthwhile things that we have. This occurred because we were always criticized for never being good enough, no matter how much we succeeded or tried. It can also happen from receiving covert criticism, someone that softly dismissed our achievements rather than affirming us, or we received no praise at all for anything we did. From this, we begin to believe we're not good enough, and over time, it becomes part of our identity. It can lead us towards expecting materialism to bring us happiness and joy, rather than living our purpose. It can bring us to the shadow of perfection, which I've mentioned in the warrior and magician episodes. We believe that if only we were good enough, that only if we achieved one more thing, we would finally be perfect and complete. And this cycle ends up never ending, as there is always someone else. Or it can mean we do nothing at all, as why bother? That we give up to hopelessness and despair. All of these possibilities lead to the shadow, that you're not good enough to be king in your own world, and that you are not good enough. Something to bear in mind as I talk about this is how a master can train a slave, because there can be people that want to train a slave within this shadow to never affirm, to always say, why couldn't you have done better? Why couldn't you have always done more? Creating an unending road of no milestones, of never being good enough. I have come across some master-slave relationships like this, and there is a darkness or an emptiness within it for the slave, as they can never be good enough. They never reach a milestone that gets celebrated. And so it is worth watching out as a master about how you do train a slave, and whether you are falling into the shadow to do this based on how you were brought up. Several years ago, I realised I was doing little with my life. Most of my days were spent working, watching TV, and occasionally socialising with friends. As I asked myself why, I had an insight that when I was growing up, it never mattered how well I did at my schoolwork or in any of my hobbies. I would never achieve praise. And in my later teenage years, I instead received shame for being good at school and not being sporty. This then led me to stop most hobbies or to push myself forward. This realization actually led to me starting to write a book and to keep going when it became hard. And it was at this point that I believe I began an ongoing process to move into my king's energy from the shadow. Many people with good king energy no longer have their runes and issues hidden in the shadow. Many of us are still dealing with runes or do not even want to do the work of healing. We walk the road with rage, shame, and anger. This reduces our power and potency. You can often come across masters and slaves who are very easily triggered or are full of anger. These are often people with deep shadow runes. They will struggle to show their king energy until they start the healing process. People who have done their healing become people we notice and glow with the fact they have done much of their inner work. Let us go more specifically into aspects of the shadows of Master as King. The first one is the Tyrant Master. Rather than a heart-centered king that helps the slave become the best they can be, a tyrant only cares about themselves. A narcissist at heart, the Shadow Master in the Tyrant aspect only cares about himself and often cannot even recognize someone else's needs, not even the needs such as health. The Tyrant Master only cares for one thing, to stay and keep in power, and they will do this in any way possible. If it involves destroying someone, they will do so. A Tyrant Master only knows to exert and use power by putting other people down and making them feel uneasy. A tyrant often hates and fears others and is constantly aware of their own vulnerabilities and weaknesses. They see other people's achievements or attempts to grow as threats and will put them down and try to stop them. When the Tyrant Master comes across capability and joy in others, he's only interested in destroying it. The Tyrant is often sensitive to criticism, deflecting or distracting away from it. He often reacts in anger to criticism, and when harnessing the manipulator mentioned in the Master as a Magician episode, he'll try and turn it onto you rather than face responsibility himself. Any decision cannot be corrected because this would mean he failed. You can also see this on a small scale when someone tries to bulldoze you to get what they want. Rather than asking, they usually assume crossing over several of your boundaries. Typically, someone who does this is scared to make themselves vulnerable and ask. So to keep themselves safe, they will try and force what they want on other people. The opposite of the Tyrant is the Weakling, a master that does not accept his power. And although this can feel less toxic than a tyrant, the impact on a master's household and slaves can be as toxic. There are many 24/7 masters with own slaves who are in the shadow of the Weakling. These masters expect the minimum from the slave, never pushing them to become the best they can be. Often the master will not take charge or provide structure or affirmation to the slave. Instead, the household is stuck in an apathetic twilight state, or is slowly dying. Usually slaves in such a household do not know what is wrong, but inside themselves they are screaming for masculine energy to provide them structure and purpose and to help them grow. Often slaves with a master in the Weakling shadow will be drifting and unable to move forward or to fulfill their potential. I've noticed an interesting pattern with a particular group of masters over the last few years. These masters have often led a blessed life without too many challenges. I noticed that when they did experience a tough time for the first time, that they have not survived. Some have withdrawn entirely from the scene. Others have gone into drug addiction, and while others blame everyone else around them, they didn't have the resilience to deal with the hard time. Now, some of us can be lucky to lead blessed lives with not much hardship, and at the same time others can have lived with many issues that lead us to struggle. Those with a blessed life will eventually experience hardship unless someone is exceptionally fortunate. So whenever you do experience hardship, whether it's the first time or another of many, you must use these times to grow your resilience. Those who build resilience through hard times are building part of their king. even if it does feel like sometimes you're failing or you shouldn't be finding this as hard. With many of the masters I mentioned who did not survive the hard times, I noticed they were often swift to judge slaves and others as weak when they saw other people struggle through difficult times. These struggles brought up insecurities with their masters, and rather than helping, they projected their insecurity onto slaves, labeling them as weak. Anyone, be it a slave or master, and anyone, be it someone with a blessed life or not, should focus on helping and learning from others who are struggling rather than projecting insecurity, and in doing so learn how to build their own resilience. So what actions can you take to grow your king? One way is to develop your leadership. So this could be finding a coach, reading lots of books about it, or finding a mentor. But really trying to figure out what is the best practice of leadership and moving to what the best of that is. Within the actual book this podcast is based on, I do have a small sheet of recommended books that you can read. One of the other important things is to really find out what your purpose and mission is. There are 3 questions that I tend to use with clients to start the process to figure this out. The first one is, if I was to die in a year, what would I regret not doing? What would you remember as having made your life worthwhile on your deathbed? And then the final question, what is my legacy? It's also worth noting that often our purpose is related to what we enjoy. Sometimes what we enjoy when we were young can be a signal or a sign of what it is we still want to do now. Now, I do work as a coach to help people find their purpose, be it for their career, their life, or as a master slave. So if you are interested in going much deeper in this, please reach out and contact me using the email address contact@masterslavelifestyle.com. The final thing that's very important around purpose is actually working towards it. And so we all can have blockers and fears. So every day, remind yourself of your purpose and what you're going to do that day to move forward. Set yourself actions and goals for the weeks that help you in achieving that purpose. And remind yourself of that purpose at the start of the day so you can move forward with the right intention. There's many other ways you can develop the king, which I also have detailed within the book, but these are 2 very big actions that can help get you started. For more action on how to work on your king and how to find out more in general, you can purchase a book I've written called Light and Shadow at masterslavelifestyle.com/book. You can also support the podcast by becoming a Patreon member while also getting early access to the podcast episodes. Thank you for listening, and in the next episode we're going to talk about slave as a king.
You just listened to Slave Phil from Master Slave Lifestyle. Look forward to an episode every month. Be safe. Be good.